All right, so we have quorum and we are open. Perfect. So two main items on the agenda today. Number one, want to just recap sort of where we are. We had the discussion with schools, like that, just a discussion about that. If we're in a position that we want to make a decision or vote on something, great. I just want to walk through any takeaways. I could do some math on the Excel sheet here while we're at it. Anything that we want to follow up on. And then number two is I got clarity from Beth and Mark on our motions. That 150,000 for health expense item, the 30,000 was the boiler, and a few other ones. So I think we're in a position to vote those tonight. All right. So let me go to this little working document in the box. So just running through where we are. So town manager budget was $3.5 million deficit. Then we know the schools voted their recommended budget March 20th. Deficit is now 4.4 million. We made revenue and reserve adjustments, dropped that down to 3.8 million. The select board started some action on the health insurance policy. I don't know exact mechanics, but I think we can expect about $200,000 for FY26 in savings. So as we're sitting here, we're about $3.6 million deficit. So then for schools, and that's where I'll just open it up for discussion. My observation was I was very happy that we had a good discussion. We walked through the questions. I think we've learned a few things, poked and prodded. I think it was a good chat. I think the couple takeaways there were, number one, circuit breaker money. I think there's some things to talk about there as a potential lever. Number two, on the FTE side, retirements. What was the exact number? What positions? What dollar amount? Unfilled FY25 positions, same thing. What are positions? How long unfilled? What was the dollar amount? Unallocated funds. I think, Catherine, that was your question of, what happens if we don't exhaust that 500,000? Do we always exhaust that 500,000? And I think, Eric, you mentioned when we looked at the top level budget that the headcount add didn't necessarily match.
Yeah, so the FTE headcount was 637, but the 25 was 625.
Yeah.
And the 637 is still greater than the 627, the prelim budget.
Got it. And did we get the detailed budget?
No, and as of right now, it's still not up on their website.
Okay. So regardless, I think we had a good discussion, so I'll just open it up of what people thought. What do you think?
I thought it was informative. I think at the end of the day, this is a financial problem more than anything else. I mean, I understand what they're asking for. I also don't think it's enough for the literacy and mathematics goals for the town. I do see some compromise, but at the end of the day, we gave them more time. They sharpened their budget as much as they could, but we're still in a position where the math doesn't work out. So I'm fine with voting on the budget that they've given us, and if any other funds open up along the way to make their budget possible, I would like to reopen the vote, but that's my view.
All right, and just for context, I looked at the property tax growth rate after our adjustments. So after our revenue adjustments, I think we increased new growth by 100 and some odd thousand. So that number is 3.6-ish%. Just so we know. So I know we've always said 2.5 plus new growth 3%. It's actually, we're predicting about 3.6.
Well, I guess for clarification, do we know if our property tax rate went down this year versus the previous year, or was it 2 years ago that it went down?
I don't think it went down. I know it's the rate's 11.7. I think it was Dan a while ago. I don't think it went down.
Well, I meant that 13.80, whatever it is. Per thousand. That's what I was curious about. Is that
all right? Any other comments, or do you want to start just modeling something out? Again, 3.5 million deficit. I think we're trying to get this number down. I think the circuit breaker dollar amount available for use was 2.2 million. Is that right, Neil?
The circuit breaker,
Yeah.
2.2 in the account. What I heard was in the account now. 2.5 already approved for October to go into the account, so that's 4.7 million.
So without being an expert on circuit breaker and how that works, I guess the way they do it now is they take the previous year's allocation and they apply it towards this year. So by, I guess, accelerating that and using the current year allocation for this year, what are the potential ramifications of that? Like, how would they, I guess, give a counter argument of why that wouldn't work or what the risks are with that?
I don't know, but because my understanding is they changed it, right? That's the current superintendent versus the previous one. And I did not see an issue. There wasn't a budget issue. The schools did not come to the finance committee for the reserve transfers.
Mhm.
And that's when they use it in the same year. Now they're holding off. But that tells me that there was a year in there where there was enough money.
Didn't rely on that at all.
They didn't have to rely on it at all, right?
Yeah,
So it could be pushed out for one more year.
yeah, that's what, yeah, you can accelerate that spending and then just spend when you get it, the reimbursement itself.
Yeah, in the same year.
Yeah.
The reimbursement comes in October.
So that to me is a big item to talk about. I'm not sure how we're feeling in terms of budget amounts. I know, 7.15. If we did just across property tax increase as a starting point, let's see. This. Yeah, so if the budget increase was equal to property tax increase of 3.6, 3.7%, that 2.2 million though also represents over 3% of additional spending ability. So I guess effectively there's an opportunity to increase the budget by 3.6, 3.7%, accelerate circuit breaker money in FY 26, and that would affect, even if you said, all right, take a fourth of it, that's 500,000, that would get you into 4 point something, take half of it, that'll get you another 4.75, give or take. So I think that is a lever to consider, that the schools could get their money, like they could get close, it's up to, if they could get close to, I guess, the superintendent budget, I forget where that was, but there's significant
584.
Yeah, so there's an argument to be made if, we can meet property tax, accelerate circuit breaker, and you could sort of get there and give the town time to figure out whatever, the long-term strategy. In addition to the headcount questions that I think we need to press for answers of. Yeah, what's the headcount, what's the dollar amount? Just so town meeting understands what's out there.
So level services implied 4.5 new FTEs.
Yeah, level services,
I don't have
No, I think it
the
was
meeting on
3.
Tuesday,
yeah,
but like level tier 1 and tier 2, what was that? Because the
Those are
slides they gave us
add-ons
were like almost unreadable.
They're add-ons.
Yeah, that's like new priorities. So outside of what they consider level services,
Okay.
like investments in literacy,
So
FTEs.
tier 1 and tier 2 are additional to level services.
Yeah.
So that was part of what's going
Yeah.
into the
And
7.15.
that's where I wanted the clarification on the full budget, because the full budget shows 9.5 full-time FTEs being added, which adds up to the 4.5 plus 5, so technically there's 5 additional FTEs being added.
As level service 5 and 4.5 for the new ones.
Yeah,
Yeah, but so why does the new sheet that we got on Tuesday show 11.5 difference in the FTEs? That's what I
Because they're
couldn't figure
adding-
out.
that's what I'm trying to figure out, but it's
Okay.
not in the detail, and that's a difference over the 637, 627 number.
Yeah,
That's changed since January, but without looking more in depth, you can't see where the FTE math has
Yeah.
changed.
but that's the bottom line though. I mean, if I add the 4.5 to what I thought was 5, I don't come up with 11. That's a net 2 difference, right?
yeah, I think that is
Yeah.
what,
So there
what is
was
the
an ad
difference?
somewhere between the two budgets that was above and beyond
That's
Yeah,
that's why I wanted
okay,
to
that's
get
what,
the
okay, I'm
detail.
trying to understand. what we're
Because you
talking about.
can't easily see the 0.2 or the 0.5 or whatever point there might be
Yep,
in the budget.
yep.
So we're talking about
So-
fractional headcount.
Yes,
Right.
Mhm.
Okay,
because in the original prelim, there were changes like that where there's not just blanket one. There's one point.
Okay, so the progression has been, they started out with FY 25's budget, which was 66,144,090 294.6, which was a 4.67 increase over the previous year. Then they had the projected their for the so-called level services budget, which had a personnel services increase of $3,572,491.81.
yeah,
Despite the fact there were only, I think, 2 FTEs in that first increases. So 2 FTEs and the budget request for personnel dollars goes up by 3.5 million.
got it.
And then I won't even go with the other expenses. So that's what they're calling, that's what they were calling their preliminary level services budget, which was a 5.84% increase from 25. And then somewhere in between that and where we are now, they had a reductions and an additional requirement. So they were able to reduce that preliminary level services budget down to 5.51%. But then they bumped it up, back up to 5.71 by the addition to the level services of a nurse position, a 0.4, some support position, and the addition of a 0.2 Mandarin teacher at the high school.
Yeah.
Isn't level services? I don't know, somehow we're adding staff.
I'm just
Okay.
reading
Yeah, I
out few
think
slides.
One would have to believe it's some kind of enrollment
Or
assumption.
there was a change and someone resigning or leaving or something, maybe?
Well, it was
They're
what,
expecting X number
yeah,
of additional students, although from the conversation we had, I gathered they were projecting flat enrollment, so
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
level
sure.
services by definition is providing the same level of service, correct?
Yeah, but if there are more kids in the system, then you can imagine.
Yeah.
To provide this, okay. Well, it's not level services.
yeah. Actually, I think they felt that they had to do the Mandarin teacher because that was promised in the previous override.
But that was only 0.2, is my understanding, right?
You're right.
Yeah, so. The.
I think what
sped has
happened
an
is they
add in
had,
it.
yeah. I think what happened there is they did student enrollments at the high school for next year. And they had a large demand for students signing up for advanced Mandarin.
So if we're not, I mean, if no one is
And
really
so-
clear on what they're actually proposing in FTEs, we should just try to figure out exactly what the level services assumes in terms of FTE additions, right?
I think there's a couple different views of, we can keep going down that track. I don't know where it's going to lead.
I mean, it may not help us change the budget, but I think it would at least
Yeah.
be helpful if they can be consistent on it, because right now, this is what they're not being consistent in the numbers they're throwing out. But
Like, I think if we lose the differentiation between a level service budget, tier 1, tier 2, it's like whatever the recommended budget is, that's the budget. So when town meeting votes, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
what they're gonna vote on. So I think, I don't wanna get lost in now we're splitting it up. So I think that it's a valid question of, it's 11-13 or 11-2/3, I forget what the difference is, but what are the roles? Where are they in the actual line items when we get there?
Jeff, would you entertain a motion to, at least for the purposes of discussion?
Yeah, I'm out for a motion. I think, we have our goals. I think before, I'll just say, we're trying to balance structural operating deficits, $13 million of capital underfunding per year, AAA bond rating, and schools are representing with indirect cost about 70% of the total budget. So I know it's, it's a big deal. So I just put that out there so people have context of, how the numbers work. So if you have a motion, I'll take it.
So I move that the education budget for FY 26 be 69 million. I'm sorry, a total of 70,242,536, which would be 69,000. I mean, 69,787 and 537 36. Try this again. 69,787,536.
What
Which
rate
is-
are you using?
I'm sorry.
What year-over-year rate are you using? So from FY 25 budget is 66,144,000.
Well, basically, when I'm done with this, my calculation, it comes out to be a 6.220 increase over the FY 25 budget.
So you're adding tier one? in?
So what I'm doing is combining
Tier one or
their
tier two
so-called,
millions?
their so-called level services budget with reductions, which is 5.51% increase, and the pilot studies for the literacy curriculum, which is,
So are you adding that 455,000?
is that the 400? Yeah. So I'm adding 455,000 to what they refer to as their preliminary level services budget with reductions.
So you would conversely technically be their overall budget minus.
But what's
And-
the dollar amount of the
Yeah.
motion that you're making?
70,000, I'm sorry, 70,242,536.
Which is a 6.2% increase.
Yeah, that's what I come up with.
So it's basically subtracting out the two pieces, the intervention and the McCall, right?
Yeah.
For the two pieces, okay.
And all the tier two priorities and things that they wrote at the end.
Yeah, so they only had two things in the tier two, which is the McCall
Yeah,
and the math interventionist. So the 4.5 FTEs.
So is there a second to that?
I'll second it just for the purpose of discussion.
Sure.
What does that get us to in terms of the gap from operating reserves now? Assuming all the circuit breaker and everything else that we're,
Yeah, so that is actually, let's see,
because I mean, I think in principle, we should come back with a zero full on operating reserves. If that's what we are trying to do, and see what the number would be in terms of growth, and then we have some gap there. to
that
try
would
and close.
increase. That would increase the deficit to almost 4 million. So we go from 3.6 million up to 3.9 million. Because what it's doing is, whatever the draft, whatever budget was 70 million. The motion as stated would increase it by about 200 some odd thousand. So,
I mean, for me, one of the benefits is it eliminates almost all of the FTE increases in the budget. In their budget requests, and holds the FTEs nearly constant until next year.
Yeah.
And then it can be part of the debate for.
but then I think that we should talk about circuit breaker funds.
right.
Because you have that 3.3% there that you can accelerate. And, we're going back up to 4 million. Or, I'm sorry. With that, we would be $300,000 above the town manager budget. So we're with our revenue adjustments. So I'm open to, dialogue, but I think we're moving away from our stated objective with that.
So I get the FTE discussion because it's hard to hire and then have to fire. The 455, if I heard correctly yesterday. And if you look at the sheet, it says it could be 205 if they get external funding. But either way, it's a one-time spend, which is a good case for things like circuit breaker,
Yeah.
where you won't need to spend it year over year. Obviously, it still requires the vote of the school committee. It's a recommendation, if that's the recommendation from the committee. So I have concerns about being in the budget if it's a one-year spend.
Yeah, and without the actual detailed budget in front of us to go through it and or makes the conversation a little more difficult.
But I want to add too, I did just a quick math here and look back between 21 and 25. We average about a $2.5 million add per year to the budget. And right now, if you take the budget as a whole at 7.15, we're looking at adding 4.7. So we're adding basically almost an entire another year's increase.
Yeah,
2 years in one is what's happening with this budget. Right?
yeah, it does seem like we're trying to accelerate a few years worth of spend into today.
Into the same year. And the difference is about 2.2 million. Interestingly, the difference between the increase on average in the past 4 years and that 4.7 ask.
Yeah.
Is a little under 2.2 million.
Yeah.
If
So-
we look at their full ask as it currently stands, and if you then take out all the additional revenue that you squeezed,
Yeah,
what is the actual gap left? And can we not just say that as a matter of principle, because we're looking to balance the budget, that is something we would ask the schools to try and cut?
so if we,
Rather than specify where it should be cut, maybe we just say, this is the gap, and if we don't take it out of operating reserves, then the schools has to contribute. If not, then this is the consequence. I think we have to probably leave it in that form, right? Because
yeah, I don't want to get too prescriptive, you know, when we go down that route. You know, and I completely understand, it's like, all right, we don't manage that budget,
Right.
fine. But if your question was where we are with revenue and reserve adjustments, and then everything was sort of done
yeah,
now, which
if you
still
if
the
you
whole,
assume the element goes in, what is the true gap?
yeah,
Their budget-
3.6 million.
That is the true gap.
This-
Okay, wow, okay. I
Yeah,
thought
so
that-
3.6 million.
So you've
is-
already taken out the full 2.2 on the circuit edition.
Oh, no,
No.
no. So if, yeah, here it is. So if, yeah, so if all that money was accelerated into FY 26, then the gap is 1.4 million.
And if we took that out of operating reserves, does that mess with our? I mean,
Where's that
do
due
you
to the
think-
rating?
Yeah, we're at 15.5 in our operating reserve. I think if we said we spent the same amount as fall time, I mean, rough numbers. I don't know. We've asked Stacy what it is. I don't know. I think something in that ballpark would probably give us enough time,
Yeah.
or the town time, to think about what they want to do from a financing strategy
So
point of
maybe
view.
that's the strategy.
I think from a rationale perspective too, I think the one thing that we talked about previously that we haven't touched on is known reversions as well. I know we have like around estimated to be about 700,000 in
Yeah,
investment income coming back.
Yeah, that one I think we feel good about. We looked at the numbers, like we know that's coming back.
Mhm.
When I sat with Beth a few times looking for, you know, reversions, and we had the rubric of if the budget is above 50,000 and under pacing in this year and is reverted back over the past 2 years, but that wasn't a material amount.
Yeah, I mean, it's 1%, right?
Or I'm saying the outside of interest income, so at the actual
Yeah,
municipal budgets.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, the municipal budgets are growing at 1.9%. Without factoring that unallocated expense.
So maybe that helps close the gap a little bit between what Rich's motion was and kind of what the other conversation is if I know we don't want to use free cash, but if it's a rationale of having known reversions coming back of 700,000.
Yeah, I mean.
I mean, plus the fact that the literacy pilots are one-time
Well,
things,
yeah.
and that's.
How much do we, can we estimate how much that, how much is
Free
one
cash.
time?
So one time's implied to be $455,000.
That's it out of all that was,
Yeah, so 623,000 of that is the 6.5 FTEs.
And is the maximum amount that potentially can be supported through a grant 100,000? Or is
I'm
there
not sure.
potential for
I mean,
more?
there's potential for more.
I would
And
argue
then the
it's
second
probably
question is, at what point would we know that?
I would assume it's 150 based on the projected total cost line. I mean, it's 300,000 with potential net cost with funding, with outside funding being 150K.
Yeah, that's what they have on this stuff.
And it's already an article for 100,000 from Mike Betancourt is putting an article for 100,000.
Yeah.
To add towards
add
professional development
for
for
this.
literacy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a proper use of that. That's a one-time fund that we're putting an article,
Yeah,
not
I
where
understand.
the town is putting an
I
article.
understand
Yeah.
how much it is, yeah.
No,
I
no.
mean, plus the fact that the students have been. They've been suffering through this difficulty for. What, 3 years now, Patrick, more?
More.
Yeah.
So why, I mean, I guess it's a discussion to be had. If not circuit breaker, why not talk to Mike and increase that? That's a one-time, that article is a one-time spend. And if this truly is a one-time spend, somewhere between 455 and that 100 and
Yeah.
somewhere where there's some private funding, it sounds like,
Mhm.
is the right number. And I don't know if Mike would
Yeah, I think there's two,
be interested in
to
that.
separate out the one-time cost clearly, like that should not be in an operating budget.
Yeah.
To Hafiza's point of how do we make the whole budget work for what we recommend, I'm sure there'll be arguments against, going from no circuit breaker to all of it 1 year. Probably, I don't know, probably gonna get some pushback, do you want to smooth it out? Is there an appetite at all to use it? So,
That's
But
a
I think what you do
decision.
is you put your best foot forward, right? And you've made a huge effort to try and squeeze as much as you can to try and support the ask. That's what we can get.
yeah,
Even that's, making some assumptions. And this is the gap. And if that's the gap,
And how do we close it?
yeah, so I mean, we've
They're gonna-
exhausted the health
Yeah.
insurance.
either we cut the school budget by that amount, or we fund it from operating reserves. I think that's the choice that they make.
Well, if you let me, just let me do the math here.
Okay,
I left my calculator at home and I'm in bad shape. So,
My phone.
what was that?
I have one on my phone, you want mine?
No, it's 1.4 million. I have the old HP 10B. So here we go. So this plus this equals that. This divided by this. So that's it,
you made it a little bigger?
Yeah, sorry. So we're saying that the schools could effectively, if they exhausted circuit breaker funds and we raised the year-over-year increase was 3.62%, that would
Balance the budget.
Sorry. $1,463,820, $1,463,820. So, but the effective increase,
2.something%.
yeah, the effective increase would be 68,540 plus. $70 million, 20.
6%. 6 point.
6.5%. So that would be the effective increase.
And that does not include all the one-time costs. Now you pull them out.
It was almost, it was just agnostic of
Right.
any specific
Right.
item. Yeah. So then, you could probably. Yeah, that's an option. So that would balance the budget if there was an appetite to fully accelerate. There's risk with that, so, we caught up, it was a policy, then it got changed. So there's a discussion point, but that could be a path for in spirit of balanced budget.
I mean, maybe that's where the scenario 1 and scenario 2 that you propose, I just sort of show that finance committee is trying to meet this goal, but still meet our principle.
Yeah, or to
Yeah.
Patrick's point of,
Yeah.
this is the maximize,
Right.
like we did with health stabilization,
Right.
take it all. You
Yeah.
got a 20% hit, take it all. What does, if we know we have X dollars coming back from interest income?
Right.
How does that offset circuit breaker usage? And, how do we minimize circuit breaker usage and come down to what's an appropriate tolerance for free cash? Or what town meeting would decide?
But don't we have to even consider FY 27 at this point? I mean,
That's
If we
what
drain-
428 million. or
yeah,
whatever,
I mean,
Well, I
if
think
we
that's where-
drain the health insurance stabilization fund
Yeah, that was.
and
That was $254,000 extra. So, and I think there's work being done there. That I don't know what the impact on FY 27 is going to be, but I think, think people looking at, I don't know.
And
looking
if
at
you
the
look at, if you
policy.
look at the school's process, I mean, they've got a number of things lined up for FY 27.
Yeah, and
They haven't,
Well,
there's
that
no
was,
numbers to.
I think I asked that question during the
Yeah.
meeting, is like looking forward, based on your
I mean,
fiscal
he's-
year 27 priorities, what does that translate to from a growth percentage? And it didn't seem like they had contemplated that as much.
They don't want to tell you.
But there is a spreadsheet that tier 1, tier 2
Mhm.
goes out multiple years.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
one point four.
It's not
It was
out yet.
1.4
It's
million,
one
right?
point 467 for FY 27, so that's the increase on top of the overall growth for level services.
Mhm.
So if you assume the level of service is gonna grow equal to what it already is, which
Are they?
technically, I mean, you can do the math pretty quickly. It's gonna be, take their budget, then add 1.467. You're gonna end up being at like another 8.12% over versus the 7.15. But
And
the
it has
number,
that
the number
compounding
keeps
effect.
getting bigger and bigger as we get closer to
Yeah,
$100 million.
yeah.
And then we've
Yeah.
got no money, so it doesn't matter
But-
because everything gets budgeted really
Yeah.
quickly then.
I think it's valid for FY 27, but there's also solving for what Derek is mentioning every meeting. How do we not just drain free cash in this town meeting?
Mhm.
We've spent $3.5 million fall town meeting. We did that again. We're at the top of the low operating reserve policy. So if the town needs more time to think about it, then maybe this is a good starting place.
Well, without having the motions yet for all the other articles, do we have an idea of how many free cash articles
Well,
there are?
we're gonna vote on one today, is $150,000 for the health insurance budget for FY 25.
Mhm.
And then I think we have a few other ones for, 40, 50, 60,000.
Mhm.
So we're, our own motions, they're proper, they're appropriate,
Mhm.
but I think it's important to look at. Yes, I'm sure there's gonna be other free cash usages on motions out there.
I mean, the one from Selectman Bettencourt is another example.
That's 100,000,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right
yeah.
now it's 100,000 from unrestricted cash.
The bylaws committee rejected merging fund and financials into all spring, right? They.
Well, the charter- yeah.
Spring and fall.
The
So that-
charter already does that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, our idea was to just realign to the charter. But I'm not sure what's actually going to be presented. But yeah, whatever gets presented, we'll read and take an
I thought it
opinion
was
on.
deferred to the fall because they didn't make the deadline for submitting. Thought that was what I heard at the select board meeting when they were presenting it.
Yeah, that I'm not sure. I haven't heard if anything's sort of postponed or not postponed, but when we get it, we'll see what's there. But if we stay on this strategy, just how do people feel about this type of approach? I know it's, conceptually, yes, 3.6 looks like, hey, that's not what we're asking for based on property tax, but effectively, there's an opportunity to actually bump that up close to 6 and even above, depending on what schools want to do.
I think that's showing that we're trying hard to
Mhm.
meet the objectives without bankrupting the town.
So this calculation you did here, the 1,463, so that's
Yeah,
exhausting circuit breaker.
Yeah, I'll show you one more.
we still
So
have
here's
that
where we
goal to
started.
close.
Yep.
Here's the revenue and reserve adjustments we made.
Mhm.
Sorry, Jeff, the 4,452, that is at their 5.84%?
No, so
That's
that's,
at 7.15.
Okay,
yeah, so that's the fully, yeah.
So it
Okay.
does include the one time.
Yeah, so that is the
Yeah.
big number, yeah, so that's the recommended budgets plus, yeah,
Everybody's happy.
That's trying to make it as good for everyone as possible.
Okay, all right.
so then revenue and reserve adjustments. The select board action on health insurance, again, not sure on the mechanics, but figure 200,000. We're not gonna realize that in our budget, just as a
Mhm.
note, I'm gonna have to put a note in our write-up. So then we get into, okay. 2.2 million sitting, exhaust that, we're down to 1.463 million. And then I took that off of. The original ask, so then we got to. 68,540,000.
5.8 asks for the.
Oh, wait a
7.8.
second, yeah,
You're effectively cutting that 1.4.
hang on one second.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think the 70.8 is their 715 ask.
Yeah, so it'd be. not H, maybe K.
Yeah.
This doesn't look right.
That's off the 5.8 not the 7 point something else.
7.15 ask is for 7,870,000.
Yeah,
So that's
So
one of
if you drop, yeah, if you drop that at 1.4 million, you are at 69.4 change.
And their 7 point something ask is 71,609.
oh, I see what's going on.
I think you're referencing that, yeah.
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 There we go.
Yeah, mhm.
I didn't get the cells right.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that. Yeah, I think that does tie out then.
So we're saying it's effectively a 7.8%. Without
Yeah.
having a cash impact on operating reserves of more than 1.5.
Yeah, so that's correct. So. If exhausting all circuit breaker funds. Then the residual amount applied to year over year, that would equate a 4.94% increase. In the year over year budget.
Yeah.
If they exhausted all, if they didn't, I think this is I think this is the exact model.
But that 71 and the 1078, I'm not sure I understand those two numbers.
Don't
Okay.
worry
okay,
about those.
Okay,
So yeah, but I think that is the model.
Yeah.
And then as we use less circuit breaker funds,
It becomes bigger gap.
yeah,
But let's say this is the best case scenario from a point of view of revenue.
yeah,
The base scenario would be the 3.6% increase that we would be consistent with the revenue growth.
yeah.
Yes.
And what would that number look like? And then somewhere between those two, I think, is the range we would be comfortable with, right?
So then your number would be based on the FY25 budget at that growth, so it would be 66,144.
So if we do this times 1.036.
Then we can just define what the delta is between those.
So then,
So it's
It's
$2 million difference.
$2,350,000.
yeah, so then we would. Yeah, I think it's worth putting that model together. Because if we just trend it out. Because yeah, if we grow at property tax rate, then we have to rely on circuit breakers less. And then we get into. What are we predicting confidence wise of reversions that we know are coming back? Maybe we can get comfortable there.
yeah, basically replacing the money that we would use as free cash. Is that what we're talking about?
So I don't want to be hasty. Maybe we're not there to have a vote. Maybe it's worth.
At least we're there, we're closer.
I
to
think
getting where we
I think
want to
we're like
Yeah.
we've sort of put a strategy or an approach in place. I think we should just work through what that model looks like and then see what's appropriate or not.
And you know what, we're $500 and $11,000 away from their level 7 services budget with reductions. Which $511,000 is not that much more than $455,000, which is their one
The one
time.
time, yeah.
So if we carve that out, we're almost exactly on
Yeah.
The level
that
service.
level services with reduction budget.
We're very close to actually.
It doesn't really solve the problem if they come back with an article for the difference, right? So
Right.
Yeah,
it will pass. I mean, there's no question in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
This town meeting will pass it.
But that would be an article for like a one-time
It
charge,
would be,
right?
but it would still have
It would still
effectively.
be
the same
cash
outcome
and-
from
No,
a-
it's
It's not a
Right, but-
perpetual.
yeah, at least
hit
it
on
gets
free
it out
cash.
properly
Yeah,
out of
no, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be on before.
Change
Yeah.
the number from this particular year, right?
Yeah.
So mechanically, I think Eric, you want to help put together this
Yeah.
model. Just want us to know exactly what we're doing, look at the numbers. Maybe we vote down this motion for now, or we postpone it. And then we can take this up, and intend on voting on Tuesday. in our next meeting if people feel that's right.
Is this file up in box now? Jeff?
Yeah, this is in box, yeah. So this is in box. But I'm glad we talked about that, and maybe if you can ask for, if we can get responses on unfilled positions, those 3 questions by Tuesday, then I think we'd be fully informed.
Who do we need to ask about circuit breaker also to make sure there's not a gotcha here somewhere on using the circuit breaker? Is that right?
Yes, the superintendent, yeah, I mean, what do you mean by that?
The
Was
gotcha is
there
we
a
don't
reason-
get to use it the following year, right?
Right, well, that's the question. And what's the issue? Is there a risk, as we said, of pulling that in? Is there something that we're missing?
I think
there a
based on
reason why they haven't?
conversations, I think it's a liquidity risk thing. So what we've done is we have the money when we spend it, so that's, that's good practice, but
Right.
given circumstances, it's worth thinking about accelerating that and getting a little bit
No,
more
I
aggressive.
understand that, but is there a reason why he has not proposed that to date or has not considered that?
We don't,
Is there
know.
something?
I don't know.
That I don't know, but I think that at one of the questions on the list that we're asking should be, why not use circuit breaker? How much of that can you use? And what about the 2.5 million that's coming in October? What's the plan for?
Yeah, because
This
that might be a
money.
path to actually structurally balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That could be a path if
Yeah.
there's a willingness to use that money.
yeah. Because if it's saved for a rainy day, I feel like the rainy day is here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was our argument with health stabilization fund, and that was unanimous, just, it's
Yeah.
there for this, use it.
Yeah.
So. All right, I'll take is it
I guess-
motion to indefinitely postpone?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, I'll move my
Just-
motion.
Oh, you,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh,
thank
you
you,
just
Richard.
withdraw, okay.
I withdraw.
Thanks for getting the conversation
Yeah.
started.
I think
The other question I have about the circuit breaker fund too is how much of that we can use towards the increase in transportation. Because the Excel spreadsheet in the state says transportation reimbursement at 44%, 285,522. So if that cost went up like 600, 800 grand, at least we can close that gap with it. In theory.
Yeah, and I think that it fundamentally boils down to what's the appetite to use it?
Hmm.
And if any, and then we can, when we vote, we can just make that recommendation. We have this money sitting here. We recommend to use it. Town meeting, decide whatever you want.
Is it a school committee vote that has to vote to use those funds, though? Would they have to officially vote on that and agree
know
on
that.
it to actually use it?
Yeah, procedurally, I'm not sure.
Okay, because we could recommend that and town meeting could vote for it, but unless school committee's behind it, then.
Yeah, do you know that, Milan?
I don't know if it's just the superintendent or the school committee has to vote on how to spend circuit breaker.
It says claims for reimbursement under this program shall be submitted by the district that has financial responsibility under 603.CMR 2803.
I suggest we reach out to Frank and ask him.
Yeah, I think it's an important question.
Can you run with that?
Hmm.
Yeah, of course.
Under either of these scenarios, we're looking at a need for an override, correct?
What was that?
No,
No.
This doesn't change the need for an override from a numbers perspective for next year.
If you
It-
use
For next
circuit
year.
breaker,
No,
I don't
next
think
year.
you need it.
It depends on the,
this year.
the
for
goal.
Next year.
so,
potentially.
But I mean, our operating reserves will have basically come down to the limit, right?
well, with this balance, with this budget, or if we propose a structurally balanced budget. Depending whatever we spend in Springtown meeting, our operating reserves will still be,
Above the limit.
13, 14, it depends. So
For this year. But that doesn't change.
Yeah, it depends
anything
on
for
the-
What's projected for next
the
year.
decisions in fall town meeting depends on health insurance again.
Mhm.
So depends on, like we've talked about earlier this week, federal government, whatever, impact we have. So yeah, I don't want to say, yes, we need it, no, we don't need it. I don't know what that looks like. But I think at least something like this gives time to think through strategy.
You think there's a way to get the 3-year plan out to kind of look at stuff like that Hafiz is asking?
Which,
What the model that we have, what happens to the
John's
operating
actually-
reserve if we use this amount or we use a different amount?
yeah, I think John's working on that and I'm meeting with Stacy and Beth again on 4/7 to just get very clear on the dollars for free cash. I am curious because what we spoke about in that model was 6.15 was the upper limit. I
Yeah.
think it was 6.15 or something like that. And what does that look like with 7.15? Just to, we'll have our model. Beth has her model, be interesting to look at them.
Yeah. They're different, it used to be they're different assumptions, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to see what the
So-
differences are of, or. You know, what that means. I think that's a piece of work we need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So. Takeaways here. Model for Tuesday. Usage of circuit breaker, looking for structurally balanced, and then we can have that discussion. And then Eric will follow up with Frank. Or schools on procedure for using circuit breaker money. And. The questions were. Yeah, the retirements, position and dollar amount, the headcount requests, additional headcount requests in FY 26 budget, so that was that difference on the top sheet and associated compensation. And then FY 25 unfulfilled positions. For how long and total compensation, so I think we get those three questions as well, plus the procedure. We'll probably be in a good position on Tuesday to vote a recommendation.
When will we know what the cost per student is?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the end of year report. I guess if we can put that on as question 4, just to make sure we're aligned on. You know, what is the per pupil expenditures, just so, you know, we're both saying the same number.
So when are the motions due? Is it this Friday? Is that tomorrow?
Yeah, so that's tomorrow. So that's the second order of business for tonight, is going through our motions for Beth.
Okay, so that's why we have to approve this article, even though there's some unknowns.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, yeah, we can change, we could make adjustments, but there is a deadline tomorrow.
So it's unknown now, but maybe by tomorrow they would know, because I can't imagine they're putting motions in with no numbers in there.
Or, what are you talking about, the ones, our motions?
Yes. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so our motions, instead of, there's a few that are indefinitely postponed, but we do have numbers
Oh, we
for.
do, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
then we're fine.
So I
with
think
that.
they might change at the edges if something happens, but I think these are, we can be comfortable that these are gonna be the numbers.
While we ask the question, I'm gonna ask like a strange one, but, are we interested in having a discussion about the warrant article that was put forth by Mike Betancourt? To see if that is a space, as well as we're exploring places, that is a space to take that 100 up for one-time spend, because that's what free cash is for, a one-time spend.
Yeah,
Somewhere between the 2.2 million circuit breaker and possible one-time spend for the literacy piece for the professional development.
I think the only question mark there is I think they're looking for outside funding as well via
Yeah,
grants.
yeah,
So I would hate
yeah.
to bump it up when that
Yeah.
money could be
Yeah,
given to us from outside the town.
yeah, I was talking about that 202 that they had on here. I'm sorry, 205, because after the possible outside funding, they still have 205 left.
Mhm.
I guess that's just another question maybe for the school. It's like, how certain is that, or where
Yeah.
are you, when would you know
yeah,
what that funding is? I'm just trying to make sure if we really want to support funding this, then let's figure out what the outside is, what the difference is. And even then, I mean, as you see, it happens in town meeting, on and off, is that the number can change in town meeting. The actual number in the warrant article
Yeah.
can change too, so there is time.
I think it's worth. Yes, I think there's time. It goes back to what is the overall funding strategy
Yes.
and making sure that it's principle based. Yeah, don't put one-time funding in the operating budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree.
Mhm.
So if we're ready to look at our motions. First couple are actually being definitely postponed, so I just literally need somebody to read.
Use this in box stuff.
This is in 2024, 2025 FinCom STM motions, the one from
Gotcha.
25th.
You want a motion to just vote the entire article? That's one article, right?
This is, hang on. So this is one article, this is one article,
Oh,
and this one article has 5 motions. So I do think we need to go through them. So
Right.
first one was a placeholder for water sewer retained earnings. It looks, like we need to indefinitely postpone it.
then we don't need to move anything?
Just, I just think we have to move and second it that we have to indefinitely postpone this specific article,
What do we call this specific article? I guess is
Article
the question.
XX, yeah.
There's a
Water
bunch of
and
Article
sewer
X's though.
retained-
Yeah,
earnings.
so referring to a transfer from water sewer retained earnings. I think we can just say this is water sewer retained earnings, this is recreation.
Okay, so
Retained earnings.
if that's the case, I'll move to indefinitely postpone the article that pertains to water and sewer retained earnings.
All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Mhm.
And we'll refer to that number one.
Okay,
Why was it being conducted at this point, you know?
Was that,
Why did they decide?
I don't think there's a need here. Because it's fiscal year 2025. So, and I believe it's the same for recreation as well.
I'll move, so.
Okay.
The first one.
Yeah.
I'll move to indefinitely postpone the article, with respect to recreation retained earnings or available funds, the sum of. Can't figure out what
Yeah, some of, oh yeah, the TV's broke.
Yeah.
Um, there is no,
No,
Even
less than
worse.
$1.
yeah. So there is, yeah, there is,
second, I think we know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
yeah. All those in favor? This is the big one. Thank you, unanimous. The third is free cash to some money supplement and reduce previously voted fiscal 2025 budget. So I guess that's if we went, this is if we went over budget. So yeah, we do have a few here. So number one, unemployment compensation for $10,000. Yeah, number two is, that's what I spoke about. I put the commentary for health insurance in the box. Hang on. So this is from Stacy on that 150,000, because that's material of shortfall to MedX renewal increasing 17% versus 5%. So keeping in the theme of rapidly expanding health insurance costs. So Milan, if, yeah, what you said, if this is all one article, it's worth it. Let's just go through them.
you want to go motion by motion or?
I think we could do
One
the whole
article. Yeah,
article.
yeah.
Yeah, let me just read them out. 150,000 for health insurance, $10,000 for Medicare. Then we had our snow and ice. 12,302 from the equipment budget and 74,343 from free cash. And then 333,000 from free cash to the expense budget for snow and ice. So that goes to, you know, if we take a calculator here, it's 10,000, 160, 170. Plus 75, you know, 250, give or take, 333. So we're up to 600-ish thousand out of free cash
Yeah.
for FY25 before we even get there.
I'm sorry, there's not a motion for a reserve fund?
Was that?
Is there a motion in there for the reserve fund?
I don't see,
Typically there is. Unless we didn't do any transfers. I thought we did a transfer.
Yeah.
I think the decision was the snow and ice to put that through free cash instead of.
Every year is through free cash.
Yeah.
And every year it's like 300 to 400.
Yeah, so there's no request for reserve fund transfer for FY25 in what we're looking at.
Okay, I was just looking
Yeah.
at the wording on the background on the motions from last spring.
Yeah,
Got it.
These things, because these are the exact same wording as.
you mean the finance committee's reserve fund? We typically take it all the way up to 400,000, back to 400,000 if we transfer stuff, because at the end of the year, that's the only source to supplement any unexpected
Yeah.
expenses, but unless we've done an RFT since fall town meeting, we don't have to make any changes, and there's a file out there that keeps up with this, I don't.
Yeah, the
know.
only thing, I
Okay.
think it was we had an RFT, then we replenished in fall town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we haven't done one
Yeah.
since then, okay.
So,
Oh.
yeah, that
Oh.
400,000 will revert, so going to Patrick's point of, high predictability reversions. But we are spending it on this side through our motions.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So I can move
Yeah.
this article, for sums of money to supplement the FY 25 budget.
Second.
Second, Catherine,
Mhm.
all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, then we get into a few other ones that we do not have to vote, so these are. I think we need to change this.
Holy crap.
Revolving funds.
Water sewer, yeah, I'm sorry this TV broke, this is making it difficult. So we get down to the next one of. Raise and appropriate some money to so the BSF, I got a commentary from Mark that was what we thought about the agreement with the
It's the
boiler,
boiler,
yeah.
I don't
So
know how many more years we have.
I think we have only one.
After this.
I think it's
okay.
been 1 year for 5 straight years.
Yeah. Just-
Until it breaks again.
Yeah, one more, this is it.
This is
Every other
real.
boiler in the state
Yeah.
last 50
It's
years.
their infusion, right?
Yeah, but yeah, we know what it is.
Yeah.
So I think, precedence there, so if people are comfortable with it, I'll take a motion.
Moved to appropriate $30,000 to the BSF.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Thank you,
I'm
unanimous.
showing two with the
All right, and then we get to. These were the revolving fund maximum spending limits. Where I spoke to Beth and, these are the limits that were agreed upon, and I think that are appropriate for each department, for each revolving fund, not department.
And Board of Health, we increased it last year.
I think we did,
And
yes.
it's okay to keep it that way, or do we have any reason to revert back to prior levels, or?
Yeah, I think
It is reverted back.
it is reverted back.
Oh, this is
yeah.
reverted.
Yeah,
This
this
is
is the
reverted back.
reversion, yeah.
And,
So the question is, is there any interest in bumping it back up to 150?
Have they asked for it?
I haven't asked.
Okay.
Yeah, if they. So are these the same as FY 25 or have they increased?
Yeah.
These are all the-
Technically, one's going down, right? So they.
well,
Do you have I think you
I
have
have it
the,
right here. So,
yeah, so
Yeah,
you
we're-
can see, you have the one from last year.
so we've got archival center, 5,000.
yeah,
Energy use,
80.
80,000.
Yep.
Board of Health clinics, 100,000.
Oh,
So
that
we're
is
at
different.
130.
30,000 higher.
So this
Yeah.
is keeping the
Is that keeping
increase.
partial, okay.
Yeah,
That's an increase.
Grass fields, 100,000.
synthetic.
Synthetic fields, 100,000, and
Historical.
historical commission, 6,000.
Yeah, I think when we had that discussion, I think it was a question of, is this temporary, is this permanent? And I think we got to the conclusion that, yeah, we're looking just to keep this because it is within their authority to spend that money, so.
And it's all reimbursed too, right?
It's all, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not-
Like immunizations and stuff like that. where
Yeah.
People pay.
Yeah, I think
There's federal programs
Mhm.
that normally you can access.
so I
Mhm.
don't have any reason to sort of challenge that number.
Move to approve motion to fix the amounts
All right,
for
Catherine,
revolving funds.
there we go.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, so that was, I will send those along, thank you. And I'm good to have an early meeting today. I know we ran the whole time on Tuesday.
Motion to adjourn.
I don't have to sell anybody.
I don't know.
There, second, all right,
Second.
all right. Thank
You were
everybody.
late too.
Yeah,
I'm
really
tired.
short meeting.
It's hard.
today.
Bearing the room, so we don't need to stay here anymore.
Stop trying to make America healthy.
I'm not